Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dan Nessel Show. I'm your host, Dan Nessel. Espavo, an ancient greeting meaning thank you for taking your power. To me, that means when you're empowered and when you understand what you can do, that you can do great things, then you can do so for others, right? By serving or by inspiring or by leading. And so it's right to thank someone for self-actualizing in this way. Now, my guest today taught me this word. And I soon understood why, because she embodies that empowerment, that service, and that inspiration. So let's get right into it with Adrienne A. Wallace, advertising trailblazer, strategic communicator, spiritual guide, my friend. Thank you so much for joining me today, Adrienne. Espavo.
Thank you for having me, Espavo.
I love that. Am I pronouncing it wrong? Is it
You
Espavo?
are not pronouncing it wrong. You are pronouncing it. It sounds very much a Spanish word. So I appreciate you pronouncing it, in my opinion, properly.
Thank you. Even though I think it's from a dead language or from a
very
is
ancient,
it from a real place?
Very ancient language. Nothing's ever dead, right?
Fair
These
enough.
creators are able to waken things up and make things anew all the time. It's always an honor to me when I actually can use that word with someone. And that when I realize that I can actually apply that word to someone or greet someone in that way or end a conversation with someone in that way. The biggest challenge, I think, of all time in this high fidelity, digital, high media age is authenticity.
Yeah.
People showing up as who they are, applying that not only in their personal lives, but in their work lives as well. And in the course of that, either their personal lives, their social lives, or their work lives, showing you what their passion is and how impactful they are and how they've chartered their power and impacted other people and how they impact you. So it's a pleasure to, when I first encountered you and talked to you and talked about your professional background and even your family background, to be able to use that word with you.
I'm really flattered. I've actually earned the Espavo-ness of my life here. I got to tell you, it means so much coming from you, Adrienne, because, you have these meetings with people and, look, I reached out to Adrienne thanks to our good friend, Todd. Actually, he introduced us.
Yes.
Todd Grossman. And as it happens, I just interviewed Todd a couple weeks ago for this very show. So his episode will be on just before yours.
Look forward to seeing that.
And he's just an incredible guy. We all know Todd. And we talk about Espavo, man, that's a guy every time I see him, I want to say, man, thank you very much for taking your power.
That's
you
right.
are just, you're doing the right thing.
That's right.
He's out there doing such great things. So, when he introduced us, he naturally just wants to help people out, right? And I went to him from a position of gratitude, of course, but also just because I was touching base and I wanted to see if he wanted to be on the show. And he said, "Oh, you got to talk to these people. I have to introduce you to these people," and blah blah blah. And I knew coming from him that I would meet some great people, but I had no idea what I was in for.
Yeah.
When I connected with you, Adrienne, because you get that kind of, I don't know, it's like a hum or like a resonance. There's a music of the spheres going on around in the universe here. And this is kind of, you get this harmony happening when you meet people who you've got some kind of kindredship with. And that's kind of what it felt like first time I met you. And, I'm hoping I know that's going to come through during this conversation for sure. And I'm just looking forward to where we're going to go in the next 45 minutes or so or hour. So, thank you so much for saying that to me and for teaching me that word. And look, anyway, you've come a long way and you have an incredible background. So, most of the people listening to the show will be from marketing or public relations, communications, a few coaches out there, people from all different walks of life. I've been around the world. So my network of people who I think, and my listeners are from all over the world as well. And within that group, I mean, if I look at what you've done, you kind of cross over with a lot of these different groups.
I do.
And I think you can relate so well to so many of them. You're clearly with the whole marketing and PR thing, which is where, I know Todd from, we have that. So you've been in advertising first and marketing for for your whole career, communications, strategic communications, been an entrepreneur. Just a couple little highlights that I found here. Well, I didn't find, you actually gave them to me.
Right.
I love this. You developed multicultural and financial market business development platform for Time Warner. You're at Girls Inc. as the youngest and first Black Connecticut state CEO. I mean, that's kind of incredible right there.
Yeah.
And the mission there, introducing STEM programming for girls, for young girls 5 to 18, as a father of two girls who probably are not very
I remember that about you.
well. They're not very STEMmy, I don't think, but I would love it if they were. But I love them anyway. But to you know to help girls to get ahead and to really understand that they are all about Espavo. This is so important for them.
Yeah.
You've done some great work in that space, and that and much, much more, and coming up through Facebook ultimately,
Yes.
and now on your own as a CMO and as a fractional CMO and consultant. Tell us a little bit about your journey and what sticks out to you.
I think my journey has been a fortunate one. I am, if we talk about when it all began, I am a child of the 80s, which I think was, as I look at my nieces and nephews and other children, I'm like, I had the best time. I'm a child of the 80s. And so, the internet did its emergence when I was coming of age. And I am a first generation American. My parents are from Jamaica, West Indies.
Mhm.
There is a huge, both religious and spiritual, which are not the same thing, influence on me, them coming from the West Indies. It's a country oftentimes referred to as a third world country. And whenever I hear that, I say, well, what's the second world and what's the first? So I think it's ego that allows us to cast anyone as belonging to a third world country.
Well, let's take a stand right now,
Yeah.
and say we got to stop saying that, because
I literally tell people all the time, bite your tongue.
yeah, exactly. Well, first of all, it makes no sense
Right.
anymore. But it's a Cold War
Right.
distinction.
Right.
The
Exactly.
first world being the West,
Right.
the second world being the communists,
Right.
and the third world being everybody.
Right. But when you start looking at countries not by GDP and start looking at countries by virtue of who people are and what cultures are, you understand that we are one world, right? So that's the start of it for me. So a huge influence, really, really strong work ethic with immigrant parents. And first to go to college in my family, many firsts in my family, being the one. And really just a person who intimately aware of statistics, having traveled very, very young, having lived in Jamaica for a few years in my youth, having lived in 7 different states, grew up in Texas, was born in the Bronx, that Bronx girl. But at age 6 or 6.5, moved to Texas, and I grew up in Houston, Texas. And I got to see a lot and experience a lot and didn't have a lot of limitations placed on me. I think that the things that when we talk about girls that limit girls, where girls are concerned about possibly their skin color or their height or their weight or whatever, my parents had always chartered those things in a way that made it super appropriate for me to be how it is that I arrived to the planet. So I ran track and field, and I ran up and down with my brothers because I was, as some people would term it, tomboyish, which I don't like that term anymore either. I'm just super athletic. And so I ran up and down with my 3 younger brothers and climbed trees while my sister maybe played at home with her easy bake oven. So I've always been the person to kind of say, I'm going to stand up and insert myself in spaces where there aren't a lot of me. And I'm okay with that.
How many of you were there? You said your sister, your brothers. How many?
There's officially biologically 5 of us. There's 6 of us. My parents have a late adoption. I'm talking about like an adult adoption, who is effectively my oldest brother. So 4 boys, 2 girls. I'm one of the girls.
Well, it sounds like a heck of a way to grow up. Certainly loving family, and I guess it certainly shaped you in so many ways. How'd you get from Houston to Facebook? I mean, that's something to.
We left Texas right before my last year of high school, and we moved to Westchester. And then from there, I did pretty well and ended up deciding on Drexel University. I was going to become an engineer. It's always good at science, technology, and math. And, Drexel's a 5-year university. Decided at Drexel after as I was going into my sophomore year that I didn't want to actually be an engineer anymore. I am fascinated still with infrastructure and roads and streets and bridges.
Yeah.
But the thought of like being out there in the cold and being like a hands-on civil engineer, that is the honest truth. I was like,
Yeah.
no, what else am I really interested in? And I'm really interested in the world. So I became an international area studies major, which effectively is like a global political science major. And
Yep.
so the remaining 3 years of this 5 year university, that was my focus and concentration. It's a cooperative work study program. So you get not internships, but you get actual jobs, and you need 12 credits in co-op in order to graduate with 160 something credits out of Drexel. In doing that, my career started.
Yeah.
As a side hustle, I did say there were five of us. So as a side hustle, I modeled through college to help myself
Mhm.
pay for college, aside from like, grants and little scholarships I got here and there. So I would say that I was in my junior year of college when I really started learning about marketing and learning about business. I started working in the banking space for what is Bank of America.
Yep.
Found myself really, really learning the details on the consumer side, understood where I sat in the whole performa of the organization, had some incredible bosses that really entrusted me and entrusted my skill and taught and mentored me and sponsored me. And that terminology and that actual action occurred very, very early on for me in my career before I ever graduated college. So I left off and pursued law school, and then kind of 18 months in was like, I don't want to be a lawyer. I really love this marketing thing. And so I started working for an advertising agency in New York and found my way to Time Warner. By virtue of that, stayed there 6 years. Other incredible bosses who just really had incredible respect for my worth and my faith. I grew a team from 18 to 180 while I was still in
Ooh.
my early 20s. So we weren't calling it startup then, but under this huge conglomerate that is Time Warner, there was a startup entity, an inside agency that did consumer marketing for the Time Warner brands.
Yeah.
And when I left there, I was actually serving on the board of Girls Inc. So you mentioned Girls Inc.
Mhm.
And I was serving on the board of Girls Inc. And they were really struggling as a brand and as an organization. And the members of the board came to me and said, we know that you recently left Time Warner. What are you doing now? And would you ever consider?
Hmm.
And I took an $80,000 pay cut to go and change the lives of women and girls and my own life as well.
Ooh.
And so what I did is I brought for-profit missives, the understanding of digital transformation and how that works and how that has worth in a nonprofit organization to Girls Inc. I leverage relationships, the Chase Bank relationship that I had, the TJ Maxx relationship that I had, the Walmart relationship that I had, the Tupperware relationship that I had, all these things that I had cultivated in terms of new business relationships at Time Warner. I picked up the
Mhm.
phone and I called those same business leaders and I said, here's where I am now. And I am in charge of your next consumer.
Absolutely.
I'm talking to
Brilliant.
girls who are
Mhm.
5 to 18 years old, and I need your help to make sure that they're here and that they come along well socially and educationally so that they can truly be a consumer of yours.
Mhm.
And that was the elevator pitch. And so 3 years there, revising their politics, making folks aware of who they were. Michelle Obama became an honorary board member, spoke in front of Congress and senators, putting Girls Inc. on the national agenda and the work of
Mhm.
STEM on the agenda. Symbiotic communication, websites looking the same, offering the same opportunities to girls. And then bringing it home and making folks understand that the one thing that young girls all have in common, whether their zip code is Greenwich or the South Bronx, is that self-esteem is the largest challenge. And so as we solidify the foundation of self-esteem, then they can do anything. They can do anything they dream of or are appointed to do. And I was done. I won the 40 Under 40 award. I was the only nonprofit executive while everybody else is at an investment bank or here or there or in advertising. I won the 40 Under 40 award and people came knocking at the door.
Yeah.
And just the digital media bug, working at Zinio, working at Diageo, overseeing sponsorships and PR and communications and CSR, and then found my nose pushing into diversity because as a communicator, I started to understand why we weren't achieving our net sales volumes.
Okay.
And we weren't achieving our net sales volumes because we weren't considering all consumers. There wasn't a full 360. And we weren't aware of the fact that every consumer doesn't take what we have in a bottle or a can and pour it into a glass and take it to the head.
Yeah.
So, for instance, me bringing my full self to work, my heritage is West Indian,
Mm-hmm.
and Diageo produces Guinness Stout. But I also knew how my dad drank Guinness Stout, and it wasn't about pouring it in a glass or drinking it right out of the bottle. He would make an elixir with it, with raw egg and Borden's evaporated and sweetened condensed milk,
Sounds amazing.
right?
I'm
And so,
sorry.
so
That's
what I
great.
did was I said, let's make sure that our advertisers are first equipped with this knowledge, this cultural knowledge and insight. Let's make sure that in those zip codes that we are advertising our brands in a way that resonates with those likely consumers. At the end of the day, it required me pushing my nose into procurement
Mm-hmm.
and saying, how do we get a more diverse set of PR agencies that are owned by women, that are owned by LGBT, that are owned by Hispanics? How do we get a more diverse set in the room, not only for our PR agencies, but for our advertising overall?
Mm-hmm.
And then how do we get our smaller specialized advertising agencies to work with our agencies of record? And at the end of the day, a year later, we brought in $18 million of new, unexpected revenue as a result of acknowledging all people for who they are and how they consume.
It goes to that authenticity
Right,
that we were talking about earlier. In that, if you recognize your consumer
right,
for who they are, for the authentic people that they are, but you present your brand in an authentic way,
right,
and you're not catering, you're not kowtowing, you're not pandering, you're
right,
doing what's right.
right. Speaking their voice.
They get it.
And so, understanding that and the underpinnings of that, I created the first supplier diversity program at Diageo, which my leave behind is there's a director and two people underneath her. And women owned businesses and businesses owned by people of color are now on that vendor selection list. And when there is something super specific and you need to speak in a language and in a culture, it's happening there. So that was my parting legacy, super proud of that. And then I went on to work in the AI and machine learning space as a CMO and did a bit of consulting. And then I ended up at Facebook, where I was working in global industry marketing. And it's taking our top 25 advertisers, or rather, Facebook's top 25 advertisers, and just looking at those advertisers and saying, how do those other advertisers speak out from Facebook platforms if they're speaking out in Brazil versus Dublin versus the UK versus the United States? And so, as a communicator managing to tent poles and media communications and strategizing an editorial calendar and what that looks like. And then COVID
Ah,
happened. So away went the Olympics, away went, as you know, South by Southwest, all the things that we
everything.
participate in.
Mhm.
And there's always a parting legacy. So the parting legacy was kind of the great stories that I learned before any of those things were able to happen. What you learn about the Olympiads that were going to be in those Olympics. And that's who you keep thinking about. You don't keep thinking about the fact that, this particular advertiser and this particular executive didn't get to talk on stage. That time will come for them again. But you really think about those who are being sponsored.
Yeah.
You think about the Olympic participants, the ones who make it an event. You think about the ones who you hear stories where this was his or her last chance. They're 32 years old and this was their last chance to they don't necessarily know if they were going to hit gold or silver or bronze for that
Yeah.
matter, but it was their last opportunity to participate. Those are the things that I take with me.
Yeah. It's funny you bring that up. I mean, funny, not funny, haha, funny, weird and odd and interesting because my wife's Japanese.
Yeah.
And of course, Japan's supposed to be hosting the Olympics. And, of recent, and for our listeners who are going to hear this in April or time or so, it is February when we're recording this. And I know I told Adrienne that we're not going to talk about anything specific in point in time, but you just reminded me of something.
Yeah.
The prime minister, not the ex prime minister of Japan, Mori-san, who is in charge of the Olympic
Committee.
started the Olympics there. He's 80 years old, and he just made the news in not such a good way, talking about how women talk too much in meetings and therefore they couldn't get things done.
Huh.
And you know, it's Mori-san, and this is completely expected from him because he is a gaff machine,
Right.
and completely inappropriate to be in a position of leadership like this. But it is what it is in Japan. And anyway, like he's making the Olympic cause much more difficult than it needs to be. When in fact, what my wife and I were discussing, where I was going with this is that it's not about him, or it's not about the millions of visitors or thousands of visitors who might or might not be able to come to Japan. It is about the Olympians. It's about those athletes who've now had to wait a year, right? They may have to wait another year. They may never be able to compete again. Who knows what their particular situation is. Just like you said, the 30
Right.
something year old person who is not going to have another chance, or the 16-year-old who is the youngest. But now, if we delay a year, there's going to be a 15-year-old up and comer who may be eating her lunch.
Right.
The dynamics change. Everything changes. It's a would have been, could have been, should have been situation.
Yeah.
Which of course is an unhealthy way to walk around thinking about
Yeah.
things.
But it is healthy though, considering
Yeah.
who we are and what we do for a living. It's the human appeal, but it's the data of each human, right? How
Mhm.
old are you? You're 32, you're 15, you're 16. What did you qualify as? What are people now qualifying at? Does that push you out? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? We manage to data all the time. This data is just more emotional, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But thank you for sharing that with me. I wasn't quite aware of the talking through the side of the mouth of the former,
Crazy. Yeah.
former prime minister. And it's probably best
Yeah.
that I wasn't. I'm such a, woman power. I think we're all important. We're necessary. Men certainly are as necessary as women. I got here because of a man and a woman deciding to convene in a love affair.
Exactly.
But the truth of the matter is, we're ebbing towards a more empathetic planet, and you probably would not have heard that type of talk out of a woman anyway, right? Women talk too
No.
much, right? So
No, but he wouldn't. Then again, it's a good sign in some ways that he's been called out on it.
yeah,
That might not have happened 10 or 20 years ago. But I don't know. I don't know who's going to be accountable, or if there will be an accountability in this, or if he cares. But the point is that these Olympics are, it's an important issue to a lot of people,
yeah.
and it's
I think
not,
throughout the
it's
world
not just
culture overall,
it's yeah.
you know,
And as we move toward the more empathic world, as you said,
yeah.
I mean, what do you say to these Olympians who may have missed their chance, or who are, how do you turn this particular batch of lemons into lemonade, I guess is.
You don't minimize the fact that they've worked with some of them all of their life throughout even childhood to get to the point at which they are. You understand the materialism of a medal, but you also understand that it's the sponsorships and all of those other things that actually allow them to maintain their way of living. And you thank them. You thank them for their bravery and their courage, and for for representing us, and if not us, whoever it is, whatever country it is they recognize in the world. You say to every Olympiad Espavo, because that they literally are truly seizing, at the very very least, their physical prowess and power. They're seizing that
Yeah.
power, and they're revealing that power to the world. Now, you don't know how it goes one day to the next. I'm a huge track and field fan, right?
Mhm.
But and I always expect Jamaica to win.
Yeah, good reason, for good
I
reason.
used to run track and field. I went to the Penn Relays, and I was like, okay, the Jamaican and the Southern girls are going to take it, right? But I also know how we train, so I have an affinity
Mhm.
to growing up in Texas and roosters being put in a field, and Coach Papke saying, "Go catch the rooster,"
Great story.
to build those legs. So there's an affinity there. So you just cherish the affinity. I know that there will come a day again where we are competitive and we are able to cheer each other on or boo the other team,
Mhm.
as the case may be. I look forward to it.
Yeah.
It's a wait and see. It's people need to be healthy, and just as Olympians need to be healthy, everyone needs to be healthy for something like that to really happen.
Yeah, and it's the way of things. I mean, the world is what's happened has happened, right? So it's a matter of mindset now, I think, at this point, right?
Yeah.
Where Are you going to, think that, okay, your moment in the sun is over and therefore life is over? Or are you going to find a new way to express and find joy? And, this sort of reminded me a little bit of something you posted today on LinkedIn.
Mm,
I just noticed that you said something about, you asked this question: what is bringing you joy today?
right.
And what an incredibly important question to be
Yeah.
asking people.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what one of the ways that we have to be dealing with, not just Olympians, but people who have had to shift
Mhm.
in some way in this crazy, terrible time of ours.
Yeah.
People have had to make an adjustment that they weren't prepared for.
Well, it's the one thing that we truly have an opportunity to build on, right? If someone tells you what is just resonating with them today, what's making them laugh, what's bringing them joy, you really have a moment to be still and to first of all enjoy that for them, be happy for them, but second of all to figure out how you can build on that, how you can compound that joy, right? As
Yeah.
just human to human. There's nobody needs help doing badly, but plenty of people will be happy to for you to add to their joy. There's not a person that's going to say, I have too much of that.
Yeah,
I have too much
there's
laughter, I have too much
yeah.
joy, I have too much happiness. So that question is one that, first of all, is sincere.
Mhm.
We live in an age where, as a communicator, as someone who's media agnostic, I wake up every morning and it's the New York Times and Twitter. Let me be honest.
Mhm.
After my prayer and meditation, it's the New York Times and Twitter. And there's so much, they thrive off of sensationalism and,
Fear.
in some cases, mediocrity and
Mhm.
sharing that news out. While I revere the New York Times is probably one of our finer media outlets, the fact of the matter is that sensationalism and things that are often quite negative win. It's not the
Yeah.
joy news. And so ultimately, we have a responsibility to be able to balance life and say so what's really really good. My sister says all the time, so what's good? That's how she says hello,
What's good?
because stuff is going to happen. So let's talk about what's good and how do we multiply that.
So maybe by looking at the Times or any media at this point, where we are now as a society, and Twitter for sure in the morning, is a way to kick off with, all right, now I know how low we are,
Right.
right? Now I know where the low point is. I know where the basement is, and I got nowhere to go from then, nowhere else to go but up.
Right.
I know I have a good perspective on the day. I kind of like it from that. I mean, of course, look, we all get our media kind of injection usually in the mornings. I think most of us do, over breakfast or wherever. Just as you listen to podcasts as you're doing your exercises or whatever. And if you're a news junkie, then you're listening to news. If not, hopefully you're listening to something fun and exciting and rewarding.
Right.
But that's actually one of the reasons why I think podcasts and just the audio art form have taken off to such a high degree. And I certainly hope that this show is is benefiting from that a little bit, which is people just are seeing all this anger and nonsense every day, and they know. Look, they know if you go beyond the headlines. I think everybody knows this. You go beyond the headlines. You actually read something.
Yeah.
You actually dig in.
Yes.
You take a breath.
Yes.
It's a very different perspective.
That's right.
You know,
That part.
you can take a balanced view that look, there might be a bias here and a bias there, but it's not something that's horribly difficult to deal with. And people are choosing to not even pay attention to that and putting, you know, talking people like me in their ear, or listening to the latest marketing thing, or listening to, something about, any number of things. You're digging deep into these articles, right? And you have to figure out. I think that's a good place to go, where you're going to try to figure out how to bring joy to people. And I'm going to be speaking with Patrice Tanaka soon, who is all about joy and
Right.
joyful planning. But really, what I wanted to know about you is you have this kind of, I guess I wouldn't call it a talent, because it's unfair to call it a talent. It is just an emanation, I think, of your spirit that just brings that aims for joy and reality.
Yeah.
Like those are not incompatible things.
No.
And I think that's one of these things where I really wanted to hear your thoughts on this, because you're a joy bringer, but you're also a hardcore marketer.
Right.
You know,
Right.
You are a spiritual person,
Yeah.
but you're also like, I'm going to get out there for a brand.
Right.
How does the circle square itself, or how do you square that circle?
I think that it's understanding that the circles and squares are both necessary, right? So
Mhm.
people have always turned to me as you're spiritual. And it's one thing to manage a business strategy or a brand strategy, but when someone says to you you're managing a brand strategy, what you're managing is people, people's
Mhm.
emotions, people's creativity, people's choices, right? And the conversations that people are having. So you take a step back and you make a literal self assessment and you figure out whether or not, first of all, you actually like people. And for me, it's a yes, and it's liking all people.
Mhm.
For me, it's a yes. And as someone who does have a very particular spiritual life where I am, the youngest deacon at my church, and that aspect of my youth, that the aspect of my skin color, the aspect of me being feminine comes into the room, even on a deacon's board.
Sure.
You recognize that work life is not that different than that very personal aspect. Ego goes into play. People have very different things going on as to why it is that they show up the way that they show up. No, none of us are particularly successful without our ability to move people and to dare I say, motivate people to do their best work and to reveal their best talent. So I think my best talent is understanding that whether or not it flows through people in the way that it flows through me, that everyone has a flow.
Mhm.
And am I a humble enough leader to be still and to recognize that flow, to understand what they're inspired and what they're motivated by, and to really talk to people as people and not as cogs in the machine?
Yeah.
We spend the majority of our lives, and we'll spend the majority of our lives at the business of work. And so for me, I've been super blessed to choose jobs and choose pursuits where this is something that I would do if I were independently wealthy.
Ooh.
And so understand that the compensation is more divine than what I see every month or every 2 weeks as a paycheck,
Mhm.
right? The relationships I'm able to make is also capital. The friendships that I'm able to conceive of is also capital, right? So because I care so deeply about people, I think I've been able to effect and move things, even in vice industries. I can tell you when I was going to Diageo, my dad was like, "How could you do that?" Right? And that was a very, very personal response to
Mhm.
whatever his headset said about the wines and spirits industry.
Yeah.
And he didn't even call it something as eloquent as the wine and spirits industry. You selling liquor? You selling liquor, baby?
That's Diageo.
Right?
It's
It's Diageo, right?
you're not going to work for Mad Dog.
Right.
It's
So it's about, I said, Dad, when do you encounter liquor? And it's about the celebration of life, right?
yeah.
A girlfriend and I toasting her graduation, getting her MBA. A friend and I celebrating his and toasting his promotion. A wedding where there's a toast to the new couple, to the newly married couple. So I really, really look for the good in all things and all people.
Yep.
And I'm super agnostic, super nerdy in that regard.
Yeah.
I think that you can't be creative, you shouldn't be ushering creative without really delving deep into the data of a culture. The numbers tell a story, the type of people tell a story. And so I think I've been able to achieve the communicating well on brand
Mhm.
at any given time by really being interested in something other than myself, people other than myself.
There's so much here.
Yeah.
So many layers of this onion to peel. And what struck me first is this idea that you just have to like people. Now, you know, if you don't like people and you're trying to be a storyteller, or maybe you could be a great storyteller and hate people. It's possible,
Mm,
but not on behalf of something for people.
mhm.
You be a. I don't think that you do a great job of representing a brand if
Yeah.
that was the case. But like people can pretend to a degree, but eventually it's the truth will win out. But no, the fact that you have to like people, I've never really heard it put to the most basic level before, like that. I mean, apart from like maybe salespeople saying it's a people's business, you have to, you got to be a people person. But it's so true. It should be like the first requirement of any role, or and whether it's a corporate job,
Yeah.
or whether it's your own, whether you're trying to bring something to the marketplace, a
Yes.
product, a service, something good. It's got to be about the people that you're doing it for.
Right.
And in fact, and the other thing that this sparked in my mind is you everything that you mentioned when you're talking about liquor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything that you mentioned is a new story. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's a story. It's not the liquor itself, or the champagne, or the whatever it is.
Right.
It's the celebrating the MBA. It's the celebrating the graduates, the celebrations,
Right.
right? It's the moments of human to human contact in life that you're actually selling, or that you're actually embracing.
That's right.
I think a lot of people are afraid of that. I just think they're just afraid to come to grips with that. They're so comfortable in this whole idea that this has more alcohol per unit, or this has more widgets per pound, whatever the heck the
Right.
metric is, the features.
Right. That really has nothing to do with the ultimate life experience in which you invite that product into.
Yeah.
So it's being able to do that. And for me, it's not tribal, it's liking all people. The universe, it's a cosmos of made 13.8 billion years ago. And plus however old you are. That's how old the cosmos is. And but there's other people plus however old they are.
Yeah.
And so you're encountering them either in passing, or you're fortunate enough to sit with or work with or marry or, be friends with or have as your child that person.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you are working as a communicator at its most basic level, you know that the data that you're connecting, the truth you want to tell, the defensive statement or offensive statement you want to craft, the brand statement you want to craft, the communication strategy you want to craft is going to impact and affect all of those like people. And so it is, yes, it's I've always kind of showed up very, very spiritual, hopefully very, very aware how everything moves.
Mm-hmm.
And we are in essence spirit more
Mm-hmm.
than anything else. And some people are high spirited and some people are low spirited people. But the truth of the matter is do you like people? Because whether they're a high or low spirit people, there's a story to tell there.
Yeah.
And that story is of real value to communicating what it is you do, what it is your business does, what it is your service is, even who you are as a professional.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I critically value people. My heritage, my Jamaican heritage, is one where they remark out of many people one.
Mm-hmm.
I got involved today in a discussion with a number of DEI professionals and other marketers, and particularly people of other than white
Mm-hmm.
ethnic disposition, really being super angry, I think is the word I would use, about a Louis Vuitton sweater
Mm-hmm.
that had the picture of that online was advertised with a picture of the Jamaican flag, but the sweater in and of itself was red, yellow, and green. And what Jamaicans call that is ice green and gold.
Ice, green, and gold.
Ice green and gold, right? And the ice is the red.
Mm-hmm.
And the notion of ice is that it's a congealed one blood people.
Oh.
The people are of one, the commonality of people is that we all have blood running through our veins. And the yellow for the sunshine, which wakes us up every day, and the green for the earth and the fruitful green mountains of that country. And what people were doing was reacting to the Twitterati saying they have the Jamaican flag and then they have this picture of a red, yellow, and green sweater. And that's not Jamaica. And I said, so sorry. Oh, but it is. Peel back the onion.
Yeah.
I have uncles who are Rastafarian, right? Between
Hmm.
Ethiopia and Jamaica is where you can learn a lot about the Rastafarians. So many of the novelties as a traveler or someone domiciled in Jamaica, you will find that red, green, and gold is in the knit hats that you will buy.
Yeah.
They have these crocheted belts that you'll buy that are typical of Rastafarians within that
I was,
Jamaican
you know,
culture.
I was going to say, I know it's not the flag,
Right,
but
right,
look, you're a child of the '80s. I'm a
right,
child of the '80s as
right.
well, right? I mean,
Do you remember?
when I was, what was that?
Do you remember Bob Marley? Do you
I
remember?
was going to say, like, when I went to college, we were in Philadelphia around the same time.
Right,
Look, I am absolutely certain, like 100% certain, that there was red
right,
in
right.
the clothing that Marley was wearing and
Yes,
that Peter Tosh wore, and
yes.
like these, there was this whole reggae resurgence at the time,
Kindred,
and
kindred. So you are my
yeah,
one blood. You get it. And it doesn't
yeah,
matter
the
that
song.
you and I don't have skin of the same distinction. We're not the same gender. So I think that we are very, very quick to react in general
Hmm.
on the basis of optics and not really peeling back the layer on culture and talent and who a people are.
Yeah.
My projection this morning was stop it, because this dragging down and tearing apart of brands, especially for those of us who are supposed to be professional communicators,
Hmm.
and not looking into the culture, which is therefore looking into the data,
Yeah.
you would never have responded like this and say, oh, couldn't they have Googled to find out the right colors? What are you
Yeah.
talking about? They said that this is inspired by the Jamaican flag, that this creativity is inspired, this sweater that they created is inspired by the Jamaican flag. They actually got it right.
Yeah.
Because if you travel through that country and you buy novelties and clothes there, and you look back to probably Jamaican reggae at its optimum and Rastafarian culture at its optimum in terms of being media agnostic,
Mhm.
that red, green, and gold is ever present. And it's ever present now. I have soccer socks from Jamaica
Yeah.
that are red, green, and gold.
I keep thinking of Red Stripe anytime you talk about the red from Jamaica, so
So let's be a bit kinder to each other. Let's start
yeah.
liking people as opposed to being looking to be offended by people. When you say Louis Vuitton got it wrong, Louis Vuitton is a brand name, certainly of an original family, but there are humans who are apt to error working at Louis Vuitton, who are frail as we all are in certain respects. And I am super, super careful
Mhm.
not to insult anyone's creativity or push them aside where they're not able to finish what it is they're probably manifesting
Mhm.
apart from this. We just need to be kinder.
Were you able to change any minds in that conversation?
That wasn't my job.
But was it a result? I mean,
I think that I was looking to educate people because I can't imagine that you know that
mhm.
and would have responded like that.
Yeah.
Of course,
Yeah.
it's inspired by the Jamaican flag. It's inspired by the Jamaican flag, and under that flag is a whole culture of people,
A
right?
river.
And from a novelties and clothing standpoint, they got it right.
I always feel like, and at the risk of stepping getting on a soapbox here for a little bit, because like I don't do politics on the show.
Right,
We just talk about. That doesn't mean we don't talk about issues. I just,
right,
it's not about blue, red, whatever. But I feel like in this environment we're living in today, and empathy is a major issue. Absolutely,
mhm,
there's no empathy out there.
mhm,
But there's these forums and kind of, you know, and I'm referring mostly to social media. You know, now, especially now, even with Clubhouse, we're seeing chat rooms come up where we've got all these different ways in which people can be tribal and
mhm,
people can be, comforted by the people that they want to be comforted by, but they can also exacerbate negative thoughts and kind of, you know, overall, if you're looking for joy, this is not the place to go type things.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of snowballs and turns into an avalanche eventually of kind of this, you know, vitriol. And sometimes with the best of intentions, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of like you. I want to try to
Mm-hmm.
think people are coming from a good place. I think folks are out there to get pelts, they're out there to score some points, maybe put something on the scoreboard today and said, you know what, I crusaded today and I was able to take down someone who was not thinking the way that I think they should think, or who was, who got it wrong about, something with regard to, in this case, the Jamaican flag, or the Jamaican culture,
Right.
or somebody who got it wrong with regard to whatever, fill in the blank.
Right.
So, and it's not just DEI, it's like, it's across the boards. This
Right.
is a sickness in our society.
Yeah.
So I think that was really, I mean, the way that you tried to educate folks about this,
Yeah.
just bring the facts,
Yeah. Yeah.
we need a lot more of that.
Yeah. I think cultural awareness is key, and some people have it and some people don't. I do have, it's a privilege to be first generation American, and to be born of these particular West Indian parents, to come from a place where there are female prime ministers. So yay America, you're finally getting that women can be in high office, in the country. But at the same time, I think that oftentimes we have to be careful, especially in our professional lives, when we get on soapboxes because we're trying to cover our own inadequacies, right?
Yeah.
And, you remember you and I talked about Marianne Williamson's poem. And
Indeed.
I think people react out of fear. I think that they react and not respond. And response requires to take a step back, as you say, peel back the onion a little bit. It may make you cry, but it may also be an onion that was in the fridge and it won't let you cry. But take some time to really say, what were they thinking? What were they thinking? Or why would it have materialized like this? The one thing that I think is incredibly harsh is when we take hits at someone's creativity who was not looking to offend anyone at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. And so I think it's important that we know what's important and understand that for everything that is being created and everything that is being manufactured and every service that is being rendered and every word that's being written, that there's a soul connected to that.
Yeah.
There's a soul connected to that. And some souls are having a harder time charting their course on the planet than others. And so how are you, as a leader, as another human being? And you know what, Dan, stop being tribal. The minute someone says tribe, the manifestation I get in my head is spears and guns and
Sure.
someone running at the offensive against another tribe.
Yeah.
The core goal is to be a little bit, for me, is to be a little bit more communal. But maybe that's because I am a communicator, right?
Yes.
And my responsibility is to bring others along and bring them into the understanding, or to seeing or hearing the reasoning for a way, or not going in a particular way, as the case may be. And that is the difference. I think that we all, it's an inadequate reaction. It's not us using our greatest self. It's not us bringing our best selves to the table when we're so reactionary.
I like the fact that you alluded to the Marianne Williamson poem that you shared with me,
Yeah.
but also this whole idea of tribes is well, in all fairness, right? You have to, such a common term. Maybe we need to just redefine what all this stuff means and figure out the right ways. That a better lexicon in some way, because you had Seth Godin come out with the whole marketing tribes thing years and years ago. So marketers believe it's our duty to build a tribe who are fans of our product, right, or whatever our service. But then again, you have this whole descent into tribalism in the society, which is clearly the negative connotation of
Right.
tribes, right? So, and that's with us. It's with humanity forever, and we want
Right.
to try to move beyond that in some ways. And in some ways, we need to have comfort with our families and the people that we love, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a tribe.
Yeah.
Maybe we just need better words.
I think as a marketer, I feel like and as a cultural marketer and communicator, I feel like I walk a balance beam all the time.
Mhm.
And it's not one where I walk and walking this tightrope and just balancing. It's not one where you're just balancing yourself on the tightrope.
Yeah.
You have to assure that you have a net below. And if you're just going to walk the tightrope, preaching and pushing towards your missives and not considerate of people on either side of you or below you, you're probably going to fall and have no one to catch you.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a time when certain buzzwords work. And, it's almost like I remember in the mid 2000s, everyone was like, the word that I was like, stop, was game changer. Everything was a game.
I'm sorry, you make me laugh. Yeah.
I didn't know we were playing a game. So I understand and I can appreciate
Mhm.
as a marketer how words catch on, right?
Yeah.
And how someone like Seth Gold could create a book and it catches on. And then so everyone's like, oh, it's the right thing to do, find your tribe and whatever. But at the end of the day, it hasn't worked.
Yeah. Then how do we find another marketing idol of mine is Mark Schaefer.
Yeah.
And I mention him all the time.
Yeah.
My friend Mark. But he talks about belonging as something that's critically important. And that we're all looking for this to belong to something. And that doesn't mean, and I think that jives pretty well with what you're saying, is that it doesn't mean you have to find a specific tribe to belong to, like a subgroup of some kind, and then wall yourself off. But just in general, there's a sense of belonging. And maybe you would say to humanity, but maybe it's something more day to day than that, where, to combat loneliness, where people then sort of go and say, well, I need a group of people or tribe to belong to. And,
Sure.
you know,
That's why we have families, and that's why we're able to choose our friends who are the family we choose for ourselves. I would venture to say that the thing to work at is humanity. And what does that look like for you, wherever it is you are, whatever your body is shaped like, however tall you are, whatever your ethnicity? What do you agree humanity looks like? And pursue that, right? We use puppies and babies in advertising all the time. So, what would you want your beloved puppy or baby to experience? Like,
yeah.
truly, like, dumb it down and just pursue good. I think there's something super violent about
Mm,
how we have sexualized ourselves, tall or short, black or white or Hispanic, or and so we have a history of unfairness on the basis of those things. But once you start carving yourself out too specifically, you
mhm,
separate yourself from an aspect of humanity that is necessary for all of us to survive.
yeah.
And so I think at some point that there's something violent about you're cutting yourself off oftentimes through these
Mhm,
labels,
yeah.
through these tribal regimes. You're cutting yourself off.
Even the word cutting yourself off is a violent metaphor in
Yes,
and of itself.
right?
Yeah.
But I
I
wanted
mean,
I wanted you to understand as a
mhm,
communicator that I see it as violent. I see this segregating ourselves all of the
mhm,
time when we have so many things that are communal that we need to be working on together, no matter what we look like,
yeah.
and as contributors because our unique talents and capabilities are necessary
Yeah.
to bring us as a country along, to really heal the planet and make for a better way for for me it's the ones who are coming up behind me,
Yeah.
you know, or rather who I'm behind because my thought is that I'm not ahead of anyone. I'm handing the baton off to somebody.
Mhm.
I am not the anchor leg.
That's a better I like looking at it that way as well.
Yeah,
You know you have to get as far a lead for the person or for those in front of you,
yeah,
and put them in a better position.
yep,
Service,
yep,
you know, selflessness in a lot of ways.
yep,
I mean,
exactly.
that's and just to kind of circle this close the circle on this just a little bit. I mean, we've been talking about that Marianne Williamson piece,
Yes.
and I don't want to leave our listeners wondering what the hell are these guys talking about. But just a little taste of it, and I like, I'm sure that you have some sections of it that you particularly like, and I think you might have even recited it to me from memory
I
when
did.
you said,
I
I'm
did.
not that far along. I'm terrible at memorizing things, but I do have it in front of me. And this part that I like here, where it says, the last section, we were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us.
Yeah.
It's not just in some of us; it's in everyone.
Yes.
And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. That's a Espavo, right?
Yes.
As we are liberated from our fear, our presence automatically liberates others. It's the fear that holds people back. The fear, as one of my favorite characters, Paul Atreides in Dune, would say, fear is the mind killer.
Yeah.
Fear is what holds people back. And getting down to that level, that if we really grasp that it's in everybody,
Yes.
not the fear, but this glory,
Yeah.
light, creation, creativity.
Creativity.
I think that would go a long way to solving every problem that we ever have.
Yeah. I think every person, no matter what your religious or spiritual disposition of the day is, will say that there is a higher being, a higher source. You can call it God, Allah, or whatever you may call it, whatever it is you believe. And so, this notion of God in all of us is really the notion of that we are all creators. We wake up every day, consciously and unconsciously creating things. I believe, as I look at you and hope as you look at me, that you understand that I am a conscious creation of God
1,000%.
and my parents.
Mhm.
So the idea around that is that creativity lives in everyone. And some people are more humble and some people are too shy. And we hear the buzzwords introvert and extrovert.
Yeah.
The ability to push that forward. But people don't do it because of fear of the retribution, the critique, the inhumane way of others.
Yeah.
And glory, this notion of manifesting glory, those words are powerful. It's like, Marianne Williamson can get you in trouble because folks say that's a little too spiritual for me.
Yeah.
But you are spirit. At the basis of what it is you are nothing but spirit. You are constantly moving. You get off the phone and something that you have said or done reverberates with the person on the other end. That's spirit, you know? Your voice
Yeah.
is spirit, and your ability to communicate by words or to draw a perfect picture or to craft a digital strategy that reaches people across the pond. We are all gods in that regard, or goddesses, as the case may be.
You're singing my song.
Yeah.
I mean, I always talk about how we have a creative imperative.
Right.
We are put here to do that.
Yeah.
There's nothing here. Okay, we got to put something there. We got to make something where there is nothing.
Yeah.
That something could be an element of the spirit, as you say.
Yeah.
It could be words, could be a building, could be a new cabinet, whatever it is that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Like we are made to be makers. And look, I mean, I think that's where I really enjoyed the Marianne Williamson piece. And thanks again for sending that my way, because we all do have that light and we all do have that, mission sort of to pursue that. And if we don't, it's out of fear, but that fear is a disservice to ourselves and to others.
Yeah.
But hey, I mean, I'm talking about it to the person who told me about it, so I know, but I'm trying to recognize and to be aware, mindful, as we say now, like that, of when that's an issue for me, because we all have these fears and none of us are like perfect about it. Like there are times where I know I have to sit back and reflect and go, geez,
Mm-hmm.
either I have to help that person to find that creative part of themselves, that light, or I have to be better about figuring out what mine is, or how do what's just happened where I felt like my creativity or my spirit was down. What does that mean? You got to be reflective and explore what's happening around you, and there's not always a straight answer.
Right. Be and seek, be and seek inspiration, be inspired. We take on roles in life. We take on roles as a partner or spouse, or we take on roles as a parent. And when we take on those roles, we have a huge responsibility. You are passing the baton or balancing the beam on the tightrope in a partnership. And so what is my responsibility there? What do I deliver if I am afraid to reveal the best of myself, my creativity, my creative thoughts, how then do I inspire the person that I brought into this relationship, or the person that I've partnered with, or the person that I'm responsible for if it's your child? How
Yeah.
then do I inspire them to be their best selves and to show up as their best selves and to not be shy? There's a fine line between humility and fear. And so we need to balance that every single day and tap into the people who will speak life into you and say, yeah, you can do it. And you know what? Here's how. Here's what worked for me. And don't be afraid to be inspired by others and to, when you're inspired by them, to share it. I think people have this tendency that if it's not what a company made in a quarter, or a great ad that got the best rating or whatever, that they're not willing to share the things of spirit. And all of these things are made manifest by spirit. And so the closer we get to being able to honor that in all of us, I think the more successful we will be, the more peaceful we will be. Businesses will thrive. There are whole communities that really, really understand that none of this stuff is mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
The time that we're in is pushing us and presenting us with opportunity to be harmonious beings.
Mm.
The holographic, not too much of a separation of darkness and light, just knowing how to manage to those two things together.
Mm.
Working from the home office as opposed to the office on 96th Street in New York City. So figure out harmony, because it obviously exists. And we're having such a time with so many lives lost so that we can actually achieve that.
There is almost nothing better I can say to sort of wind us down than to seek harmony, as you've just said. It almost brings us full circle to the beginning of our conversation, where I was talking about, how meeting you for the first time was like this kind of like the music of the spheres. There's this sort of resonance.
Thank
And I'm absolutely certain that people who have listened to this are going to feel the same way about you. I just want more, but I gotta kind of say, if you want more, we're gonna have to come back again, because I can continue speaking with you forever. I want to just say that you inspire me. You've sent me some really amazing things. The Marianne Williams piece is just one small thing, but you inspire me, and when people are looking for inspiration, they could do almost no better than to find their own Adrienne A. Wallace to speak with.
I like to think that there are many of us.
I hope so.
When I talk about God, I tell people that we're more alike than we think, because while God is the omnipresent creator, God had to get tired and just said, "I'll make another one more like you."
Yeah.
So community is not that hard to find. I'm super, super blessed and honored that I've able to find that with you.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I really do thank you for considering me and sharing the time with me today.
Well, look, if anybody wants to know more about you, Adrienne, and of course they can go to LinkedIn, look up Adrienne A. Wallace. And by the way, there's the A. You have to have the A, Adrienne A. Wallace.
I am Adrienne
That's the brand.
Wallace everywhere on every platform except Twitter, because it has that already. So I'm Adrienne Wallace. And then my email is adrienne@adrienneawallace.com.
Yeah. And her name was spelled properly in the episode title. So look it up there. Adrienne, a pleasure is too weak of a word to explain how I feel. So thanks so much for coming on. This has been amazing. And the time just flies when I'm talking to you.
Dan, I benefit best. And Espavo and Namaste.
Espavo and Namaste. Thank you. If you enjoyed this episode of The Dan Nessel Show, please head on over to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or the podcast player of your choice to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And please don't forget to spread the word. Thanks for listening.